the fluorescent lights of Hartwell Industries. Executive floor had long since dimmed when Marcus, Chen pushed his cleaning cart past the corner office at 11:04 p.m. Through the glass walls, he could see her, Rebecca Hartwell, the 34-year-old CEO who'd inherited her father's pharmaceutical empire and tripled its value in 3 years. She sat motionless at her desk, head in her hands, shoulders trembling in a way that made Marcus pause despite every instinct telling him to keep moving, to stay invisible like he'd been trained. He'd worked as a janitor for 6 months now, ever since the accident that killed his wife, and left him with 2 daughters to raise alone. The night shift paid better, and it meant he could walk Sophie and Emma to school each morning, help with homework each afternoon, tuck them in before heading to work. Nobody at Hartwell Industries knew his story. Nobody asked. To them, he was just the quiet man who emptied their trash bins and made their offices sparkle while they slept in their beds. But something about the way Rebecca Hartwell was crying, silent, exhausted, the kind of crying that came from depths most people never had to visit, made Marcus knock gently on the doorframe. She looked up, startled, mascara streaking her face. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the divide of mahogany, furniture and leather chairs, across the chasm between a woman who signed million-dollar contracts and a man who scrubbed toilets for $14 an hour. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't know anyone was still here." Marcus should have apologized and left. That's what the employee handbook would have recommended. Instead, he found himself asking, "Are you okay, Mom?" Rebecca laughed, but it came out like a sob. "My father died 2 hours ago." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing the mascara further. "The board doesn't know yet. The press doesn't know. Tomorrow morning, I have to announce it to 3,000 employees and somehow convince them that I can lead this company through the transition. But right now I just—" Her voice broke completely. Marcus set down the trash bag he'd been holding. His wife had died in his arms in the hospital, and he recognized the specific kind of grief that came from losing the person who'd shaped your entire world. "I'm very sorry for your loss," he said quietly. She nodded, trying to compose herself, but her hands were shaking. "The funeral is in 4 days. I have to stand in front of hundreds of people, business partners, competitors, the media, and I have to be strong. I have to be the woman my father believed I could be." She looked at Marcus with red-rimmed eyes. "But I don't know if I can do it. I keep thinking about walking into that church alone. And She pressed her fingers to her temples. "This is going to sound insane." "Try me," Marcus said, surprising himself with his gentle tone. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I need to practice. I need to walk through it, just once. So tomorrow doesn't break me completely when it actually matters." She stood up, smoothing her designer suit with trembling hands. "I need someone to pretend to be my support, to stand beside me, to—" She met his eyes, and Marcus saw something there he recognized from his own mirror. Desperate, raw vulnerability. "Pretend you kiss me for 10 minutes. The words hung in the air between them like something fragile and strange. Marcus should have backed away. He should have made an excuse and returned to his cleaning cart, to the safe anonymity of his night shift. This woman lived in a penthouse, overlooking the city, while he shared a 2-bedroom apartment with his daughters. She wore shoes that cost more than his monthly rent. They existed in different universes. But he thought about Sophie, who was 7, and Emma, who was 9, and how they'd asked him last week if it was okay to still miss Mommy, even though she'd been gone for 8 months. He thought about how Emma had started having nightmares about him disappearing too, and how Sophie had stopped laughing the way she used to. He thought about standing at his own wife's funeral, alone with 2 confused little girls clinging to his hands, wishing someone, anyone, had offered him even a moment of human compassion. When the world felt like it was ending. "Okay," he said simply. Rebecca blinked at him, clearly expecting rejection. "What?" "I'll help you," Marcus said. "Whatever you need to get through tomorrow." For the next 10 minutes they stood in that corner office and Rebecca practiced. She practiced standing straight while Marcus stood beside her, solid and steady. She practiced accepting condolences while he held her hand in his calloused one. She practiced the moment She'd have to turn to greet her father's oldest friend, while Marcus remained a silent, stable presence at her side. And when she finally broke down completely, reliving the moment she'd gotten the call from the hospital, Marcus did what he would have wanted someone to do for him. He let her lean on his shoulder, this stranger in her expensive suit, and he didn't say anything stupid or hollow. He just stood there and let her be human. "Thank you," she whispered when she finally stepped back, wiping her eyes. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Marcus said quietly. "We all need someone sometimes." He returned to his cleaning cart, and Rebecca returned to her desk, and the night continued like the moment had never happened. Marcus finished his shift, went home, made breakfast for his daughters, and forgot about the whole strange encounter by the time he was helping Emma with her math homework that afternoon. 4 days later, Marcus was mopping the executive floor when he noticed unusual activity. Security guards stood at attention, employees clustered in hushed groups. On every screen, the same news coverage played. Rebecca Hartwell had announced her father's death with such grace and strength that analysts were calling it one of the most poignant corporate addresses in recent memory. She'd stood in that church, head high, and honored her father's legacy while making it clear she would forge her own path forward. Marcus smiled slightly and kept mopping. Good for her, he thought. The next evening, Marcus found an envelope taped to his cleaning cart. Inside was a handwritten note on Rebecca Hartwell's personal stationery. "Would you join me for coffee tomorrow morning? 8 a.m., my office, please, R.H." When Marcus arrived the next morning, still in his janitor's uniform because his shift didn't end until 8:30, he found Rebecca waiting with 2 cups of coffee and an expression he couldn't quite read. "I looked up your file," she said without preamble. "You have an engineering degree from State. You worked at Morrison Tech for 7 years before—" She paused, her voice softening. "Before the accident. I'm sorry about your wife." Marcus said nothing, waiting. "You're overqualified to be pushing a cleaning cart," Rebecca continued. "Why are you here?" "The night shift pays better," Marcus said simply. "I have 2 daughters. They need me in the mornings and evenings. This job lets me be there for them." Rebecca nodded slowly. "What if I told you I'm creating a new position? Director of Facilities Management. It would mean overseeing building operations, sustainability initiatives, employee wellness spaces, day shift, salary that would let you afford better childcare when you need it." She met his eyes. "What would you say?" "I'd say that sounds like charity," Marcus replied carefully. "It's not," Rebecca said firmly. "That night you taught me something my father never could. You reminded me that leadership isn't about power or control or maintaining appearances. It's about showing up for people when they're vulnerable, without expecting anything in return." She set down her coffee cup. "I want to build that kind of culture here. I want people who understand that kindness isn't weakness, that compassion is strength. I can't think of anyone more qualified to help me do that than a man who showed a stranger grace when he had every reason to protect himself and walk away." Marcus thought about his daughters, about the opportunities this could create for them. He thought about being able to attend Emma's soccer games and Sophie's dance recitals without constantly juggling schedules. He thought about his wife, who'd always believed that goodness was its own reward, that small acts of humanity rippled outward in ways you could never predict. "When would I start?" he asked. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his new office on the 8th floor, reviewing plans for an on-site childcare center that would serve Hartwell Industries employees, a center where Sophie and Emma now spent their afternoons, where other children of single parents and working families would have safe, affordable care. On his desk sat a framed photo of his daughters and a handwritten note from Rebecca. "Thank you for reminding me what matters." The story could have ended there. A simple tale of an unexpected promotion and a grateful CEO. But life, Marcus had learned, was rarely simple. One evening, as he was leaving work, he saw a young woman sitting on the curb outside the building, crying into her phone. She wore a visitor's badge and clutched a folder of job applications. Marcus paused, remembering a fluorescent-lit office, and a woman whose grief he could have ignored. "Are you okay?" he asked. She looked up, startled. "I'm fine. Just, I didn't get the position I interviewed for. And I really needed this job, and I don't know what I'm going to do now. Marcus sat down on the curb beside her. "Tell me about yourself," he said gently. 20 minutes later, he walked back into the building and sent an email to Rebecca, recommending the young woman for a different position in the marketing department, one that actually matched her skills better than the role she'd applied for. Within a week, she had the job. This became Marcus's unexpected gift, the ability to see people not as titles or positions but as humans, navigating their own struggles. He transformed Hartwell Industries facilities department into something more, a department that, yes, kept the buildings running smoothly, but also created spaces where employees felt valued, where the janitors had pathways to advancement, where the often invisible workers who kept everything functioning behind the scenes were recognized and respected. Rebecca's leadership style changed too. She started having coffee with employees at all levels, listening to their ideas, creating programs that supported working parents and caregivers. Under her guidance, Hartwell Industries became known not just for pharmaceutical innovations, but for its corporate culture, one built on the radical notion that treating people with dignity and compassion wasn't just morally right, but actually good for business. And it all started with 10 minutes on a night when a CEO asked a janitor for help she desperately needed, and he gave it without hesitation, without judgment, without asking what was in it for him. Years later, when Emma was preparing to graduate from college and Sophie was considering medical school, they asked their father about the most important lesson he'd learned from their mother's death. Marcus thought for a long moment before answering. "Your mom always said that we're all just walking each other home," he finally said. "That night I met Rebecca, I could have kept walking. I could have protected myself, stayed invisible, avoided getting involved in someone else's pain. But your mom wouldn't have walked past someone who was hurting, and neither could I." He smiled at his daughters. "Every good thing that's happened since, this job, this life, the opportunities you both have now, it all came from choosing to stop and show up for another human being when it mattered." The story of that night eventually spread through Hartwell Industries, though never with names attached, never with details that would embarrass Rebecca or make Marcus uncomfortable. It became legend, folklore, the kind of story new employees heard during orientation, once late at night when it mattered most. Two people from completely different worlds chose kindness over convenience, vulnerability over protection, humanity over hierarchy, and in doing so, they changed not just their own lives, but created ripples that transformed an entire company culture. Because that's the thing about compassion. It doesn't stay contained. It multiplies, spreads, inspires others to choose differently when faced with their own moments of decision. Marcus had simply done what felt right in the moment, never imagining that showing up for a grieving stranger would reshape his entire future. But maybe that's exactly how kindness works best. Without calculation, without expectation, without keeping score. Just one human recognizing another's pain and deciding, in that instant, that connection matters more than self-protection. That vulnerability shared is somehow stronger than armor worn alone. The fluorescent lights still hummed in the Hartwell Industries building late at night. But now, when the night shift janitors moved through those halls, they did so knowing their work mattered, their stories mattered, that someone saw them not as invisible fixtures, but as valued members of something larger than themselves. And sometimes, late at night when the building was quiet, Marcus would pause outside that corner office and remember, 10 minutes. That's all it had taken. 10 minutes of choosing to show up, to be present, to offer comfort to someone who desperately needed it. 10 minutes that proved what his wife had always known. We're all just walking each other home. And the least we can do, the most powerful thing we can do, is make sure nobody walks alone.